This is a true first edition, first printing hardcover. I've always kept an eye out for this book, but I've never been able to find a first edition for a really good price. I'm gonna show it to you now. Are you ready? Here we go. Hey creeps, Cameron Chaney here, author of Autumn Crow High, and welcome back to Library Macabre. Today I have for you, as promised, my half-price books 20% off sale book haul. Recently, I posted my Barnes & Noble hardcover sale haul, whatever you want to call it. Maybe you saw it, maybe you didn't. If you do want to see it, the link's going to be up there somewhere. And I guess all of the bookstores really wanted to take my money that week because literally at the same time, there was a 20% off sale going on at Half Price Books. And of course, as a huge fan of Half Price Books, if you've been here a while, you know, I had to go. And I took advantage of it and found quite a lot of really good books, including a holy grail, like holy grail, holy shit kind of book, because I freaked out. So you're gonna see that very soon. Most of the books in this haul are going to be either horror or kind of like nostalgic books. But since this is mostly a horror themed channel, I'm going to be mostly showing the horror books in this haul. And then if you want to access an extended version with all of the other kinds of books I got, you can access that over on my Patreon. It's super, super cheap. You just have to sign up for like $2 and you can access literally hundreds of videos. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into the book. We're gonna start off with some nostalgic choose your own adventure style books, because if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, you probably remember that there were a lot of choose your own adventure kinds of books, not just choose your own adventure and give yourself goosebumps, but lots of other ones as well. For instance, there were the Twist-A-Plot books. This was a series that started in the 80s and lasted for, I think, maybe around 16 to 20 books. I haven't really looked it up. We have the Video Avenger, which is book 7, and Race into the Past, which is book 8. So these ones are more science fiction themed. This series had books written by various authors, including R.L. Stine. He's kind of the reason why I started collecting these books. So I found a couple more of these for my Twist-A-Plot book collection. And speaking of R.L. Stine, we also have a Wizards, Warriors, and You book. This is book 2. It's called The Siege of the Dragon Riders. And this is written by none other than Eric Affabee. Who the hell is Eric Affabee, you ask? Well, the answer to that question is, it's R.L. freaking Stine. He wrote this under a pen name. And the funny thing is, he also wrote another book in the series under the name R.L. Stine. So I don't know why he didn't just write this one under R.L. Stine, but whatever. I'm really trying to get into collecting more than just his Goosebumps and Fear Street and Point Horror books. I want to own everything he's written, and I'm trying, and I'm getting pretty close, actually. We have a couple more choose your own adventure style books, and these are actually kind of a spin-off of that series. We have the Time Machine series. So here's book number 1 and book number 2, Secret of the Nights and Search for Dinosaurs. This series began in 1984, and as you can see, there's a lot of cool illustrations and facts about the past here. So very cool books, and eventually I'd love to have the full series. Look at this, Turbo Cowboys. I saw this at Half Price Books and had never heard of it before, which is kind of rare for me. I just had to have it. So Turbo Cowboys, book number 1, Jumpstart by Tony Phillips. Look at this awesome book. It's kind of like a Mad Max kind of knockoff, but for teenagers. And very similar to Turbo Cowboys, we have 2 books in the Denizens War series. So Denizens War is another very much like Mad Max. It's a futuristic, apocalyptic thing. This one looked, interesting to me, but what really sold me is book 2, which is called Hell on Wheels. And just look, that awesome cover, and look at that. Oh my gosh. It looks so cool. So I initially passed up on this one, but then I saw this and I was like, oh, I want that. And then I'm like, wait, I need to get book 1 if I want to get book 2. So then I bought both. They were cheap. It was like $1 after the discount. I'm glad I grabbed these. They look really fun. We also have a goofy science fiction paperback here called Galactic Dreams. These are my favorite kinds of science fiction and fantasy books, are these pulpy paperbacks from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I like stories that have, you know, tough people traveling through space with cute little alien creatures. Speaking of nostalgia, we have the novelization of Big, you know, the Tom Hanks movie where he wishes he could be big and he wakes up in the body of a 30-year-old. It's such a good movie, such a classic, and so funny. And when I saw the novelization, of course I needed to grab it, because how couldn't I? It's also written by B.B. Hiller, who wrote the novelization for The Karate Kid. So, fun fact. Dinotopia was a series that I became familiar with because of the ABC miniseries that came on like in the early 2000s when I was a kid. I think I was in 2nd grade when that miniseries came out, and I was obsessed with it. And then I found out, oh my God, there's books too. There's a bunch of books. I only have a handful of books, so there's a long ways to go still. But yeah, there's another Dinotopia book for my collection. Have you ever heard of the Edge Chronicles? This was a fantasy series that came out when I was in middle school. I bought the books as a young person with the intention of reading them and just never got to them. However, I've always been missing book 4, and I finally found book 4. And even though I've not read any of the books yet, I decided, well, let's just go ahead and get book 4, and then maybe soon, hopefully, I will binge the series. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I've actually heard these are really good, so I do want to read them. And they're also beautiful books. We've got the deckled edges, which everybody's hating on, but they're wrong. Deckled edges are beautiful. And we also have lots and lots of really nice illustrations. So there you go. There's a little gap filled in my collection. Hopefully when I do decide to start reading these, I'll like them. Because if I don't, then I'm gonna have to find a home for this whole series. Alice Hoffman is an author that I'm a little bit familiar with. I have read Practical Magic by her and love that book, and I also am a big fan of the movie. However, I have not read any of the new Practical Magic books that have come out in the series, and I've not read any of her other books. So lately I have been in the mood to read the Practical Magic series in particular and finish that series up, and to check out some of her other books. So I did find a couple of her books at the Half Price Books sale. So first off, we have her latest book. This is brand new, just came out, and they had it on sale for a really good price. So this is The Invisible Hour. Sounds really good. You know, all of her books are very much, you know, magical realism. They are grounded in reality, but they also have a lot of magical elements. So this one sounds great. And I also bought one of her older books, which is called The River King. Honestly, I just want to collect all of her books and really dive in and start reading everything she's written besides just Practical Magic. Getting into some of the horror now. We have what's more of a thriller, I guess. This is the newest book from Riley Sager. It's called The Only One Left, which is about this old woman who lives in this, you know, castle on a hill, or mansion on a hill. It's a Gothic house. She is the only surviving person of this massacre that happened, and now this woman is coming to take care of her. And this nurse begins to dig up secrets and finds out more about the night of this massacre. It sounds really good, and I've heard wonderful things about it, and everybody has said that it's extremely Gothic. Lots of, you know, spooky hallways and spiral staircases and all of the things that I love as a reader. Here's one that's actually labeled as science fiction, but it looks like horror to me, and it sounds a lot like horror. We have Nimbus. It is a vintage paperback. It has a very cool cover. If you know anything about me and my channel, you know that I collect vintage horror paperbacks and am crazy about them. So whenever I see any vintage horror book for a good price, I snatch it. That's just what I do. I've become kind of a completionist when it comes to vintage horror. So there's one. Even though it's labeled as science fiction, I'll probably put it in the horror section. Y'all have heard of Dean Koontz, right? This is The Fun House, which is a novelization of the Tobe Hooper horror film. I love that movie and have never read the novelization. So this is a later printing with a newly designed cover, or it was new back in the early 90s when this came out. It originally came out in 1980, and I do have the original first edition paperback of this. In fact, it is right here. The Funhouse by Dean Koontz, aka Owen West, which is the pen name that he wrote this under originally. I just picked this up because I like the step back art. I'm a sucker for carousels. You know, I have a lot of books in my collection that have carousels on the cover. I don't know why, it's just one of those things I like. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is part of the Walmart 2 for $1 series. That's what I call it. I remember seeing these at Walmart all the time when I was a kid, and I had a whole bunch of them. I never had the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde one though, so I grabbed it. It's got a really cool cover. It's kind of a bummer that most of it is covered up by this Walmart sticker that cannot be removed, but this is also kind of nostalgic for me because we had so many books that had this terrible, unremovable sticker. Now, this is the one. This is the book that I was telling you about that I could not believe I found for such a good price at Half Price Books. I've always kept an eye out for this book, but I've never been able to find a first edition for a really good price. And when I say first edition, I mean a first edition, first printing hardcover. I have a copy of this book that I actually got swindled on eBay. I thought it was a first print. It turned out to be a book club, a very convincing book club edition. But this is a true first edition, first printing hardcover. So I'm gonna show it to you now. Are you ready? Here we go. Stephen King's It. I have wanted a first edition hardcover of this book since I was a tiny little child, and now I have it. And this was less than $15 after the discount. This book goes for a lot of money now on eBay, mostly just because of the popularity. This is a true first edition, first print. You can tell because you've got the price up here. It says $22.95. That's very important. You could have what seems to be a first edition in every way, but if it doesn't have that price tag, it means it's a book club. On the copyright page, there's no mention of future printings. It just says it is first published in 1986 by Viking Penguin Inc. It has the cloth binding here, which is also very, very important. It needs to have this cloth binding. If it has those points, then it is a first edition. So I finally have one. I can't believe it. And not only do I finally have one, and not only did I get it for a great price, but it's also in like mint condition. It's a perfect, near pristine copy. I got so lucky. I can't believe it. And I just recently found copies, first edition, first print hardcovers of Cujo, Different Seasons, and Christine, all at Half Price Books in recent months. If I ever stumble upon a first edition hardcover of Carrie or The Shining or Salem's Lot or Night Shift or even The Dead Zone at Half Price Books, I'm gonna freak, because those are the rarest and books that I'm pretty sure I will never find first editions of. But who knows, maybe it'll happen one of these days. I just have to be very persistent and keep looking. Also, before I move on, if you don't mind, it's a free way to support the channel. Just give me a like down below if you're enjoying this video, and please don't forget to leave a comment before the video is over. Ashes to Ashes. This is another gothic book that looks really cool. I had never heard of this. It is published by Diamond Books, which has published a lot of horror novels, and I tend to collect those, but I did not know they published any gothic books. So I saw this and just had to pick it up. I can't believe it is in such nice condition. It looks brand new. The Sketchbook by Washington Irving. I'm a big fan of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. The Sketchbook is kind of like Washington Irving's journal in a way. It's got snippets from his stories. It's got little anecdotes, vignettes about his life, and different essays. So it's kind of a combination of a bunch of things. Black Easter by James Blish is a book that I already owned a copy of, but I found this at Half Price Books for so cheap, and it is in such great condition that I had to pick it up to replace my other not so pristine copy. With a cover like this, I mean, I would buy this over and over again. I mean, look how terrifying that is. And I love when books used to use photography in this way. I mean, nowadays, they'll point a camera at a model and say, smile, we're gonna slap this on the cover of some random book. But back in the day when they used photography, it was so intentional and artfully done, and I love that. So good. Maybe one of these days I'll incorporate some photography like this into the covers of my own books. Moving on, we have Red Death by P. N. Elrod. This is the first book in whatever this series is called. I don't know what it's called. But anyway, this book, the series has been recommended to me so many times, and I finally found the first book in the series. I have the other books, mostly all of them. So Red Death is the first book in a historic vampire series, kind of like Interview with the Vampire. So I've heard great things about it, and I'm very excited to dig into it, especially being a fan of Anne Rice, because I love Interview with the Vampire so much. So anything like that, I will probably like. They have to have those signature Anne Rice feelings of guilt, though. That Catholic guilt, it has to be in there. Take a look at this. This is a Ruby Jean Jensen book, one of her very early books. It's called The Lake. This is one of her books that was published with Tor. Very rare, usually very expensive to get online. This was at Half Price Books for less than $2. It blew my mind. So here is The Lake. Already own a copy of this, but I couldn't leave this behind. I had to go ahead and pick it up. So there's another copy of The Lake. Addison House. You know, I was just talking about how much I love vintage horror paperbacks, and Claire McNally is one author that I have a lot of. A lot of her books are compared to V.C. Andrews, and some of her books are more like ghost stories. So this is definitely, you know, one of her more ghost story, haunted house kind of books, which looks really cool. I love this cover with the eyes in the sky. It looks a lot like the poster art for Fright Night, which is one of my favorite posters of all time. I love that image. So anything with like a scary face in the clouds, that totally draws me in. This is pretty creased up, but it was very cheap at Half Price Books, so I went ahead and grabbed it. I like to try to get books that are in mint condition, but sometimes you just gotta take what you can get, you know? This is one that I took what I could get a few years ago. It was a very messed up copy of She Wakes by Jack Ketchum, but I got lucky and I happened upon this at Half Price Books for like $2.99. A really nice copy. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn close. She Wakes is Jack Ketchum's vampire novel. I love Jack Ketchum. The Girl Next Door just blew my mind and made me sob. I can't really describe to you just how devastated I was by that book. It really messed me up for a good week or two after reading it. Jack Ketchum, cool dude, very talented, will always pick up his books. Robert Bloch is another one that I will always pick up. Of course, Robert Bloch is the author of the original Psycho. I have read Psycho. I have read Psycho 2. Psycho I loved. Psycho 2 I hated. So it could be, his books could probably go either way. But I think overall, even though I hated Psycho 2, I thought it was well written. It wasn't what I was used to with the Psycho 2 film, which I actually really enjoy. So when I read Psycho 2 and saw just how different it was, I was like, oh no, Robert Bloch, you're wrong. Psycho 2, the film, was much better, and a much better way to follow up the original Psycho. I think he wrote Psycho 2 more out of spite, but I am eager to check out his other works. Mannequin by Robert Byrne is published by Pinnacle Books. All of their books tend to be very collectible and sought after, and this is one that I've been trying to seek out for a long time and just haven't been able to find a copy until now. It's more of like a medical thriller. I don't care what these books are even about. I will always pick up Zebra and Pinnacle books whenever I see them in the wild, because they're so rare and they're so expensive online, and if I'm ever going to check them out, I need to get them when I see them out in the wild. I don't want to pass up one of these books and then regret it. The Sorority Eve by Tamara Thorne. This is part of a duology, I believe. So this is called The Sorority Eve, and the next book is called The Sorority Marilyn. There might actually be a third book as well. Moving on, we have a few more horror books here. This is Famous Tales of Mystery and Horror by Edgar Allan Poe. This is the Watermill Classic Edition, which is very nostalgic for me because all my classrooms in elementary school had these editions, and I would often read them. Have you ever heard of Star Wars Galaxy of Fear? This is basically a Star Wars version of Goosebumps, because of course in the 90s there were spooky series for kids everywhere because of Goosebumps, and Star Wars even had its own response to that. So a spooky Star Wars series for kids. Have you ever seen Twitches on Disney Channel? Because guess what? It was a book series first, and not a lot of people know this. The book series has this very goofy early 2000s look, which of course is very appealing to me because I find it a little bit nostalgic. I mean, at this point, when these books were coming out, I would see these covers in the bookstore and be like, those look terrible. And they do. It's not wrong. But now I see them and I'm like, aw, it's so early 2000s. I also grabbed a Goosebumps book. Now, I already have a first edition of this. This is actually the second edition, but it's a first printing of the second edition. This is Attack of the Jack-o'-lanterns. I don't actually really collect these editions because I really only have space for just, you know, the original printings. However, it kind of called my name. It was also packed with a bunch of Goosebumps bookmarks and stuff. Somebody who had the book before just crammed a bunch of Goosebumps stuff inside of it. So really, I just wanted to buy it for these. So we have a Goosebumps bookmark, a Goosebumps trading card with the Beast from the East on it, another Goosebumps bookmark, even more trading cards, and the glow-in-the-dark light switch cover, which somebody made into a bookmark. So maybe I'll try to salvage this and put it on one of my light switch covers. We'll see if I can salvage it. I don't know. Speaking of Goosebumps, I also picked up this How to Draw Goosebumps book. Now this is actually newer. This came out in the last, I don't know, 10 years. 2010. So yeah, it's come out in the last 10 years or 13, 14 years. I picked this up because it was dirt cheap. It cost $2, and this is actually really expensive on eBay for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't think it should be because it is so new. And by new, I mean almost 15 years old. We have Ghost in the Headlights. This is by Lindsay Duga, just a middle grade ghost story that I thought looked cool. Berenstain Bears Freaky Funhouse. The Berenstain Bears chapter books were some of my favorites when I was in elementary school. These were great. They especially had a lot of spooky Halloween themed editions in the series, and I'm trying to collect those. So this is actually the first one I've been able to find out in the wild. We also have the Ankle Grabber, which is this tiny little picture book, spooky picture book in the Creepies series. I read a lot of these growing up as well, and they're very fun. And A Gargoyle on the Roof by Jack Prelutsky. I loved Jack Prelutsky's books. He is a wonderful poet, just one of my favorites as a kid, and I didn't know about this one. This is of The Gargoyle on the Roof, so one of his spookier themed books. Never read this one, never heard about it, but I know I would have loved this one as a kid. So those were all of the horror books, and now I have a whole stack of other kinds of books here. We've got mysteries, we've got just vintage kids and teen books. I also have a DVD box set because I saw this. It was $60. Okay, so it's a little expensive, but it was also 20% off of that, and it's 12 seasons of Murder, She Wrote. It's the whole series, and I love this series so much, and I've always wanted this box set. So when I saw it, and it was finally at a more affordable price, I mean, it's still a little pricey, but when you average it out, 12 seasons, 22 episodes with each season, that's actually a pretty good deal. So, you know, just under $50. So this is the complete series of Murder, She Wrote, and I'm going to start at the very beginning, which I've already done, and just start rewatching this show from the very beginning. It's going to take me probably 2 or 3 years to get through it all, but I'm going to have a lot of fun with Jessica Fletcher. It's one of the greatest shows of all time, one of the very best mystery shows. If you've never seen Murder, She Wrote and you want a cozy mystery series, this is the best, like absolutely the best. What a haul. So many books. I was just having the time of my life shopping at Half Price Books and finding so many treasures. Let me know down below in the graveyard what books made you the most excited, the most nostalgic. Don't forget to give me a like if you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time in another episode of Library Macabre. Later, creeps.